Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, rather, excuse me. Let me just get myself situated here. All right, so we're going to kick this off. I'd like to welcome everyone to this funding forum conversation. This has been a work in progress that started out with a conversation with Throwe Environmental, who you'll hear from more today, and NIFWIF about coming to the coast and talking about resiliency funding that NIFWIF has available, and you'll hear more about this later. And it grew into this opportunity to bring together as many partners as we could in the funding conversation, focusing on state and federal partners, particularly in light of all of the bipartisan infrastructure law dollars that have been made available. And those numbers associated with those dollars are extraordinary. And so we looked at this as a possible opportunity to start the conversation around the different pots of money, start people thinking about the ways that they can look at these pots of money, how they can bring them together, and really create projects that have a very high level of potential for impact and moving the dial on resiliency in our coastal communities and improving and conserving our real critical natural resources. So my name is Lisa Phipps, and I am the manager of the Oregon Coastal Management Program, and we are happy to be a co-host of this event today. You're going to be hearing from a number of different entities. We've broken the day up into two parts. You're really going to be hearing from state partners this morning. You're going to hear from Throwe and NIFWIF about their funding opportunity, which just opened up. You're going to hear what I think is going to be a very valuable session on putting together grants for these really complex pots of money. There's a lot that goes into these grant applications, as everybody knows, and any tricks and tools of the trade that we can bring to you to help facilitate that process is of great value. And then we're going to have a break at 12:15. We're going to go offline for about 45 minutes. We'll reconvene at 1. And then we'll start the federal portion of the agenda today. This is not an exhaustive list, and some folks who were very interested simply couldn't be here today. So what you'll hear for some is just a brief synopsis of what they were able to send us, but then the information to make additional contacts afterwards will be made available to you. But as you can see, even just from the folks that are able to be here today, already there are a lot of pots of money out there available for all of us to really start making some major differences in our challenging environment. And then we're going to go into a breakout session. And for the folks that are able to stick around, the funding folks that are able to stick around, they're going to be in breakout rooms, and you're going to be able to move in and out to ask them questions. They can be general. Maybe you weren't comfortable asking them in the group setting, or they can be project specific. But what we really want to emphasize is whether you take advantage of the breakout room today or not, we really encourage you to reach out to the folks that are here today, and information for others that were unable to be here today, to reach out to those folks and start the conversations about your projects. It's maybe you're not going to be ready this year, but you may very well be queuing up to be ready for next year. And so these monies pots that we're talking about have about 5 years in them. And while we all hope that some level of funding is maintained to continue the good work that the BIL funds are starting for us. We can't depend on that. We all know that. And so really taking advantage of this opportunity while it exists is critical. So I am going to make sure that I covered everything that I was supposed to say today. And I think that I did. And I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm now going to hand this over to Mark with Throwe Environmental, and he is going to lead this morning's conversation on navigating state programs and resources. And he'll be introducing you to each of the panelists as they come forward. So let me get everybody back up on my screen. Are there any questions for me before I get started? And the answer is nope. So just from a logistics perspective, it's in the chat, but I'll also now say it for the record. Please keep your camera off if you can. Certainly stay muted. Utilize the chat box. We're going to be following it and asking questions from it. If you're unable for some reason to use the chat box, you can also do a raise your hand, but I would encourage you initially to utilize the chat box. If we run out of questions, which seems unlikely, but we may, if we run out of questions, then we will open it up to raise hands and call on people. But it's a little bit more manageable if we can use the chat first. Do not hesitate to pop something in there. And in this instance, there are no dumb questions. If you're thinking about it, chances are very good someone else is too. And if it feels fundamental, that's okay. Those are the kind of questions we need to get out on the table. So do not hesitate to type a question in there, and we will do our best to make sure that we get answers for all of them. So if there's nothing else, and in the interest of making sure we stay on time, Mark, would you like to step in?
Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate those comments. Thank you for kicking off the meeting, and thanks to you and your entire Department of Land Conservation and Development team for hosting this really important webinar today. As Lisa pointed out, my name is Mark Belton, and I'm a field liaison with Throwe Environmental. Throwe Environmental are field liaisons for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Conservation Resilience Fund. I'm here in Coos Bay, Oregon today with my colleague Joanne Throwe. And joining us on the webinar in a support role are Kyle Gray from the National Capital Region and Courtney Green from Rhode Island. I'm going to go ahead and facilitate our first panel discussion this morning called Navigating State Programs and Reserves, and it should take us all the way to 11:30. I'm going to provide an overarching question, which is, from your agency's perspective, please describe one or two upcoming funding opportunities that pertain to coastal resilience. More specifically, what we'd like to know is what it is and how much is available. When do you anticipate the RFP coming out? And is there any match required? Each panelist on our panel discussion this morning will have 10 minutes to provide a response. And for our attendees, as Lisa pointed out, we're going to encourage you to use the chat feature for questions, not raising your electronic hands. At the end of the presentations, Kyle Gray will pose the questions in chat to our speakers. But don't worry if we don't get to your specific question. You'll have the opportunity this afternoon in our breakout sessions to ask them directly of the speakers yourselves. So let's go ahead and get started. The first speaker on our panel discussion this morning is Claire Figener with the Oregon Coastal Management Program at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Claire focuses her work on improving coastal shoreland public access policies and establishing the Coastal Zone Management Habitat Protection and Restoration Program. She brings over 20 years of experience in land conservation, habitat restoration, recreation planning, program administration, and grant management to this work. Claire, over to you.
Hello. Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Well, I'm excited to start off this funding panel today by sharing information with you all about the Coastal Zone Management, Habitat Protection, and Restoration Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Funding Program. That's a mouthful. Next slide, please. So you might be asking yourself, how is it that the Department of Land Conservation and Development is administering this program for coastal conservation and restoration? Well, let me share with you why we're involved. The bipartisan infrastructure law, or often you've heard it as bill, or also you may have heard it being referenced as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. This is an investment in the nation's infrastructure, competitiveness, and communities, which includes coastal resilience issues. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is administering multiple of these bill funding programs, and one of those being the Coastal Zone Management Act Habitat Protection and Restoration Funding Program. Coastal states with coastal management programs are eligible to apply for this funding. And in Oregon, the Department of Land Conservation and Development is the lead state agency of Oregon's coastal management program. So Oregon's coastal management program then works to get this funding out to partners doing coastal resiliency projects. So hopefully that chain of all these involved makes a little bit more sense. Next slide. So the purpose of this particular funding is to increase resilience through landscape scale habitat restoration and conservation in coastal ecosystems and promote coastal resilience in underserved coastal communities, as well as those most vulnerable to climate impacts. As Lisa had mentioned, this bill funding has funding for 5 years. And in the Coastal Zone Management Program, the first year of funding was last fiscal year, 2022. NOAA expects to award about $50 million worth of project funding in that category. And those will be announced later in March, later this month. Some of this funding also goes to fund the National Estuarine Research Reserves. And in just a minute, Bree Yednock, the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve Manager, will chime in briefly to talk about that program. And another funding that goes, that's in this funding source helps fund capacity for the Oregon Coastal Management Program to administer this funding. Some general criteria for this particular funding source is projects need to be shovel ready. They need to occur within Oregon's approved coastal zone, which in general is from the ocean to the crest of the Coast Range. And project goals within an application need to be highlighted in a coastal and estuarine land conservation program plan or KELP plan, or other state or regional conservation plans. Next slide. Each application can only include one project type, and the eligible project types include on-the-ground habitat restoration work, restoration planning, engineering or design work. And the third is ecosystem or habitat conservation, which is acquisition of fee land or conservation easements. Project proposals can ask for up to $6 million per application, and match is not required, but cost sharing is an important element considered in the valuation criteria. Something to be sure to take into consideration is that all eligible projects must be implemented on non-federal publicly owned lands. So that means for restoration projects that that project has to take place on land owned or controlled by non-federal public entity. And for land acquisition projects, only those non-federal public entities are qualified to hold title to land or easements. So a non-federal public entity includes state governments, federally recognized tribal governments, and local governments. So nonprofits and other organizations can partner on these projects as long as this criteria is met. Next slide, please. So really quickly to review the sort of application process. for this funding is that NOAA, it starts with NOAA releasing their notice of funding opportunity at the beginning of the funding cycle. So for this year, NOAA has said they're anticipating releasing that in May of 2023. And then we have basically a three-phase or three-step process for applying. The first is that letters of intent need to be submitted to the Oregon Coastal Management Program. The Oregon Coastal Management Program must be the primary applicant for the LOIs, and we are limited by NOAA to only submit a total of 3 LOIs for Oregon. So each coastal state only is allowed to submit 3 letters of interest. For project proponents, your first step is to submit your letter of intent to the Oregon Coastal Management Program. And we will also require a pre-application consultation meeting to just chat about your project ahead of time. And then the submitted LOIs will be competitively reviewed, and OCMP will choose those top 3 projects to submit to NOAA. We don't have all the timelines yet on when these will be due, but NOAA is anticipating their LOIs will be due within 60 days of announcement. So OCMP, your LOI to OCMP will be due sometime less than 60 days. Because once we choose the top 3, we will then put final touches on the LOI with partners and submit that to NOAA. NOAA competitively reviews those and invites, the last stage is that NOAA invites applicants to submit full proposals. And we work with project proponents on submitting a full proposal. And NOAA is anticipating that process to be open for approximately 90 days. Next slide, please. So that was a lot of information shared quickly, but as mentioned previously, don't fret. We are sending you lots of resources on all of these funding sources. There will be a fact sheet about this. We are setting up a website on DLCD's webpage for this funding program. And please feel free to contact me. My email's here. I think it was put in the chat as well. And you can reach out to me asking any questions and to get on the funding notice distribution list for when that notice of funding opportunity comes out. I can send you a notice. And if you have questions that don't get answered at this panel, again, mentioned previously, but join me for the DLCD breakout room at the end of the day. And you can ask me any questions there as well. So now really quickly, I would like to pass the proverbial mic to Bree Yednock, the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve Manager, to give you just a quick overview of what she's working on at the reserve.
Thanks, Claire. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I just wanted to take an opportunity and share in the same way that this funding is available, as Claire described. There's funding available for the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. South Slough is the only reserve in Oregon that's part of that system. And so there's funding associated with projects in our target watershed, the competitive projects that we'd be applying for. So if there are folks in this area that are interested in partnering with us, please reach out to me. But another part of the funding is to build capacity at reserves to bring in this infrastructure funding. So we have teamed up with the Wild Rivers Land Trust on the South Oregon coast. They're based out of Port Orford. And I don't think Max Beacon is here, but I think Claire can provide both my email and his email as well. But the capacity building part is really to work with folks on the South Coast, engage the public, engage communities to identify priority projects that would be a good fit for any of this funding, not just the reserve system funding, but any federal funding that's coming from the infrastructure law. And so I just encourage folks, if you're in the South Coast in our area, to reach out to Max Beacon or myself, because we're going to start trying to do some outreach and engage with folks to identify priority projects that we could collaborate with and work together to bring that money to the coast. So if you have a project that you may not have the capacity yourself to put together a proposal for, that's a perfect thing you could bring to us and our group, and we can look at strategies for developing proposals to fund acquisitions or restoration projects on the South Coast. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thanks, Claire, for that opportunity.
All right, thank you, Bree, and thank you, Claire. Moving on to the second of our 5 panelists in this morning's session, Andrea Hansen. Andrea has worked for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for 16 years. As the Conservation Strategy Coordinator, she leads the ODFW Conservation Program and implementation of the Oregon Conservation Strategy, Oregon State Wildlife Action Plan. She is currently acting as the Conservation Policy Coordinator in the Director's Office. Andrea.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I'm going to be quickly covering 4 grant opportunities through the ODFW that have slightly different focuses to try to have a broad suite of projects we might be able to help fund. So the first one is probably the most applicable and the broadest grant opportunity is the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So for the 23-25 biennium, we have $2 million available. The maximum award is $50,000. The match is, it depends on if OCRF is fully funding your project. You don't have to show any match or funding support. If OCRF funds are providing funds for a bigger project, then there is a need to show that you have enough financial support to complete the entire project. So some important dates, there are cycles every year. January and August is when our RFPs come out. There is one currently open. It closes March 27th. And at the bottom of the slide and in the chat, there should be a link that provides all the information of this current grant cycle that's focused on prioritizing drought, wildfires, and aquatic resiliency. So typically OCRF focuses on projects that improve the health of Oregon's ecosystems and populations of fish and wildlife species, and any activity undertaken to enjoy, appreciate, and support fish and wildlife and their habitats. So that includes things like habitat restoration, habitat connectivity projects, and then species research and monitoring. The other bucket of interest is to support outdoor recreation opportunities. Engaging diverse outdoor users is a big one, supporting wildlife associated recreation, enhancing and restoring trails, and then education and education materials and opportunities. One thing to note is we can't use OCRF funds for land acquisition. So some keys to being really to when you're applying to be competitive is to try to link as much as you can to the priorities identified in the Oregon Conservation Strategy, which is Oregon State Wildlife Action Plan, and or to highlight how your project engages with people who have not participated in the past because of certain barriers. It also helps to be very clear about your time frame, provide the measurability of your project, and show cost efficiency in your project proposal. And these are open to public and nonprofit organizations. We can't fund federal agencies, but otherwise we're pretty open. Next slide. Okay, so this one, fish passage restoration funds, we don't have a maximum or minimum, but we're typically awarding about $40,000 to $300,000. There is no match required, but it is encouraged as part of the consideration for your grant application of what sort of partnerships and match funds do you have for the project. The current RFP just closed January 31st, but another application cycle is expected late 2023, early 2024. So again, there's the website at the bottom of the page and in the chat. Please keep watch, and we do send out notifications when that RFP opens. So this grant is specific to fish passage restoration barriers. So if your project or your interest has a component about dam removals, culvert replacements, tide gates, grade control structures, fish ladders, then this is a funding source, a potential funding source for your project. Ways to be competitive are to look through our ODFW statewide fish passage priority list. If it's on there, you would be competitive. If there's ESA or state sensitive species in that system, that's very helpful. If your project improves access to high quality habitat or a restoration project for those sensitive species to move into, that's very helpful. You will need landowner agreement. And again, matching funds and partnerships are a benefit to your application. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so next project is the Fish Restoration and Enhancement Program with ODFW. Again, there is no minimum or maximum. We're typically awarding about $50,000 to $150,000 per project. Same thing, no grant, no matches required, but it is a component that we review in your application. There are RFPs that go out every January and then either July or August. The primary focus and intent of R&E funds is to increase recreational fishing opportunities and improve commercial salmon fisheries. But R&E funding can be used to, so when you're doing projects and there is a tie to one of these, I just want to throw out there that R&E projects can be used for things like habitat restoration to enhance natural fish production. If it includes any aquatic inventories, it helps to, part of it is to improve access to fishing opportunities or hatchery restoration, and then we can cover some educational materials. So ways to be competitive with this one would be to connect to ODFW priorities and plans. If you can tie your project outcomes to fishery benefits. And some of the things we can't do are long-term sort of R&E funding commitments. And again, the eligibility is pretty open, public, private, and nonprofit organizations. And there's the website and the staff contact to contact if you have any questions. Next slide. And the last one, to just show a little range of availabilities, is the Access and Habitat Program with ODFW. Again, no min and max. It just depends on our limitation for that year. We've funded small projects up to $1 million projects. Same thing, no matches required, but it is encouraged to be competitive. You can apply at any time, but there are certain funding cycles when the board approves or reviews applications in January, April, July, and October. Some of the projects that you can consider this funding for are wildlife habitat improvements. So that's habitat restoration again, noxious weed control, riparian fencing. If your project includes revegetation after fire, this does include land acquisition. And it really becomes competitive if you are improving any sort of public access to hunting. So there is a preference. We can provide funding for public lands, but there is a preference for private lands. And in your application, if you identify the benefits to wildlife from habitat improvement, particularly game species, and if you have any sort of public hunting or access that you can be providing, that's a benefit. And or if it alleviates any wildlife damage issues. So this is also very open to public, private, and nonprofit organizations or an individual landowner. So all of this information has websites and the actual ODFW contact who manages these grant programs. So I'm here to answer any questions later on, and or you can always contact the staff in charge of each one of these granting opportunities. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was terrific. Just a reminder for everybody listening in today, we're going to hold all questions until the end. Please put them in chat, and then Kyle will tee them up for our speakers after the last presentation, or the last speaker in this presentation. So moving on to our third panelist this morning, Alyssa Lydell. Alyssa is originally from Wisconsin and obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and a Master of Science in Geology from California State University, Sacramento. In April of 2023, Alyssa will be celebrating her 4-year anniversary with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Alyssa.
Thanks, Mark. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah, so today I'll be presenting 2 funding opportunities. I work for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, but the first funding opportunity is sponsored by the Oregon Health Authority and administered by the Business Oregon. And so for 2023, there's approximately $200,000 available in funds. And a water system can apply for either grant up to $50,000 or a loan up to $100,000 per project. And for this fund, no match is required. I also wanted to put out that funds need to be spent within 2 years of the contract execution. And this is a reimbursement basis fund. And so any activities that were essentially done before the contract is signed would not be eligible for reimbursement. However, within the contract, you would submit essentially the receipt to Business Oregon, and they would reimburse that activity. Also, any water system which has received a loan and or grant within the past 2 years would not be eligible. So this year's deadline is also fastly approaching, with applications due March 22nd, 2023. And so project types, essentially the projects, if they cover either risk reduction within the delineated drinking water source area of an active public water supply well, spring, and or surface water intake, or contribute to reduction in contaminant concentration within a drinking water source area. And so I have several different types listed, with land conservation planning, which includes forest inventory and crews, forest management planning, and legal assessment, riparian and roads restoration, rural landowner assistance, algal bloom risk reduction, community outreach and engagement, and drinking water protection plan development. And again, that's a short list of eligible types of projects. Something exciting about this fund is that you can apply either as a local or regional approach, with local essentially meaning activities that concentrate on a public water system source area. And a regional approach would be activities that involve multiple communities and or water systems attempting to address a common source water issue or group of issues. And so stages, the first stage that a project could focus on would be enhanced delineation. And this would be where a project would complete, update, or refine drinking water source areas. Another stage that this fund covers would be enhanced assessment. And so this would either be inventory and or evaluation. And inventory would be a project which improves existing potential contaminant source inventories, or evaluation, which would be existing and potential threats to water quality. And then the source protection planning and design stage, these would be projects which identify appropriate protection measures. And then the biggest one would be implementation of these planning measures. And so any projects which would be implementing protection measures in a drinking water source area would be included. And also reiterating that eligible activities which reduce risk within a source water area or contribute to a reduction of contaminant concentrations in the drinking source water area would be included for this fund. And so another thing I wanted to include is that any public and privately owned community and nonprofit non-community water system with a completed source water assessment is eligible A source water assessment is performed by either the DEQ or OHA. And so if a system needs one of those to be completed, feel free to contact me or OHA. Let's see. And so program priorities, I have essential components, again, need to be located in the delineated drinking water source area. And it's for public drinking water systems. And this year, the prioritization of projects would be any project that has risk reduction potential, addresses sensitive areas in their drinking water system or source area, and enhance water quality. And we also have the prioritization of disadvantaged communities this year. Next slide, please. So the additional information slide I have laid out the eligible or non-eligible systems. And so again, an eligible system is a community water system, which is a public water system that has 15 or more service connections year-round or serves 25 or more year-round residents. And then a nonprofit, non-community system is a public water system that is not a community water system and regularly serves at least 25 people or more than 6 months per year, and is legally recognized and as a nonprofit entity. So the best example of that would be a school. And I wanted to reiterate that, again, no match is required for these eligible systems. Unfortunately, non-eligible systems include federally owned public water systems and local watershed partners. However, a watershed partner could team up with a water system to apply for these funds. In the geographic focus map I have, it's kind of small, but anywhere where there's yellow, that's a surface water that's been delineated. And then brown is groundwater well or spring with a 10 and 15-year groundwater time of travel. And so these are the delineated areas that would be eligible for this fund. I think that's it for this slide. Yeah, thank you. And so the second fund I want to talk about is the Drinking Water Providers Partnership. And this was brought by the common vision of watershed restoration by several partners. So we have the USDA, EPA, BLM, the Department of Environmental Quality with Oregon, the Washington Department of Health, the GEOS Institute, the Freshwater Trust, and Wild Earth Guardians. And if you go to the link on the bottom, the partnerships essentially sponsored by the GEOS Institute, but all of these partners sponsor this fund. And so for this year, we had approximately $500,000 available. And then let's see, each project request for funding should range from $10,000 to $50,000 with a 25% match encouraged. And for this fund, funds need to be spent within 18 months of the award start date. And unfortunately for 2023, proposals were due by January 7th, and the award announcements were in February, so it's a very fast turnaround. And so we do have the RFP, which should be coming out this November. And again, you can stay in contact with me for more information as we go into 2024 funding year. And so project types, it's an exhaustive list, but essentially any project which would provide clean, safe, and affordable drinking water to communities and restore native fish habitat and protect fish populations. So this fund has very, as long as your project addresses both, it's eligible. And let's see, so focus on activities that will improve or protect aquatic, riparian, and/or watershed health. These projects also need to be located in a drinking water source watershed in the state of Oregon or Washington. And the stages are similar to the other fund that I went over, but also include outreach and education as a really big portion of this fund. Let's see, essential components. So again, it needs to benefit both drinking water and native fish habitat. There also needs to be a nexus with the USFS and or BLM lands. And so essentially what that means is for any project, there needs to be some sort of federal land that's included in the project. So something that would also benefit federal land since this is a partnership fund. Let's see, so prioritization, we have any project that would restore and protect watersheds, address sensitive areas, and supporting partnerships for restoration projects. So it's a wide eligibility, which is really exciting, several types of projects. And again, the 25% match is something that's just encouraged. And so I wanted to go over that organizations that are eligible include tribal, local, state, and federal governments, educational institutions, public water systems, nonprofit organizations, watershed councils, landowners, and soil and water districts. I think that's it for me.
All right, thanks so much, Alyssa. That was terrific. Again, I want to encourage attendees of the webinar today to go ahead and input your questions into the chat. And we'll save those to the end of the presentations this morning to go over those individually. At this point, I'd like to turn over the microphone to Jason Gately. Jason is a mitigation program specialist with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management. Jason grew up in Salem, Oregon, and has 20+ years of experience in the planning profession, including a few years at DLCD managing natural hazard mitigation plans and working with local communities in floodplain National Flood Insurance Program compliance. Jason.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. So it says on the agenda that I'm with the Department of Environmental Quality. I think I'm with Department of Emergency Management, if anyone was confused on that. It says right there on the slide. So you're getting the third or fourth string speaker today. The people who would normally present this information are at a FEMA conference, actually, in Seattle. So this is the most important slide that I have. It's Anna Feigum is the State Hazard Mitigation Officer, or the SHMO, and Jesse is her deputy. And they kind of separate duties, and I'll go into that in just a little bit. I'm giving you a very abbreviated version of what they would normally cover because this is a huge topic, and there's a lot of money out there. So I will make the entire presentation available in the chat as soon as I'm done. Next slide, please. And hopefully these go. Yep, great. So what are we talking about? So we're talking about FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance Grant Programs. So there's two sides to this. On the left are post-disaster, and on the right are non-disaster grants. The post-disaster grants are the ones that, as you would imagine, when there's a disaster, a federally, presidentially declared disaster, gets declared, money is made available to the state, and that goes into this program over here, the post-disaster grants. But this is just part of it. On the other side is the non-disaster grants, which include BRIC and flood mitigation assistance. Those are completely separate. They have nothing to do with when a federal disaster is declared. These are available every year. We just got done, or the country as a whole just got done with the application process, and now they're going through review, but this is every year. So this is competitive. You can apply for it. Jesse Weaver is the person to contact. I think there's $2 billion or so available throughout the country. On the post-disaster side, we have, there are no grants open right now for application. But when there is a disaster, money can be made available. And we've given out a lot of money over the last few years, as you would imagine, because we had the wildfires, COVID, some flooding, and some other disasters. Next slide, please. Not trying to complicate things at all, but what I was just talking about essentially is the 404 grants. So those are the HMA grants that Anna is in charge of. On the other side, and they're closely related because they get awarded at the same time, are the public assistance grants. And I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not involved in that program, but Julie Slevin is the state PA manager. And you could give her an email or give her a call and find out what, if any, grants are available now or possibly in the future for that. Next slide. Just a little terminology. So the money comes from FEMA through the state. We are the pass-through entity to locals. So we're considered the applicant. A federally recognized tribe can also be an applicant, but normally they're sub-applicants. So they apply to the state for funding, and we help them with that. Other sub-applicants are other state agencies, private nonprofits, local governments. So that's just a little terminology there because that can be confusing. Next slide, please. So on the post-disaster side, so we're talking about the ones that Anna Feigem manages. We have what's called the HMGP grants and the HMG post-fire grants. And so these can be used for a variety of different things related to implementing long-term hazard mitigation planning projects. And things that are eligible under the HMGP program include things like flood mitigation projects, open space restoration for flood storage, wildfire vegetation removal around homes, seismic retrofitting of public buildings, generators, purchasing generators, land acquisitions. So for instance, up in the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla had flooding a few years back, as you remember, and they applied for an HMGP grant. They actually applied for 3 of them and got all 3. And they're using that money to acquire buildings and demolish them and return that area to open space. So that's just an example. Next slide. The non-disaster grants are primarily the BRIC program. So that's the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. I think I got that right. That's that nationwide competitive grant program. We got probably 40 or 50 applications, I think, in Oregon this year. And so look for that next year. Jesse Weaver's the person to contact on that to find out dates and the application process. Next slide. Who's eligible to apply for these? You can read it right there. It's, I think, as I mentioned, state agencies, federally recognized tribes, local governments, and private nonprofits, except for BRIC and the FMA, the flood mitigation assistance. Private nonprofits are not eligible. One caveat is that if you do want to receive HMA funding, so either BRIC or HMGP or FMA, your community must have a up-to-date natural hazard mitigation plan. And quite often, cities are partners with counties. Tribes can be partners with counties in putting together and being plan holders, as we call it. But you want to make sure that talk with your county. If you're a city, make sure that your NHMP is up to date. And if you have questions about that, you can call me. or you can call Joseph Murray or email Joseph, and we'll let you know if your plan's out of date or it's coming, it's almost out of date. So yeah, there is potential that if your plan is expired, that you can get an exception. So that is a possibility, but we prefer you not do that. Next slide, please. This slide, I just threw it in here. It might be a little confusing. This is just to kind of show you the process, the period for applying for an HMA grant. And this isn't BRIC, this is HMGP. But basically, there'd be a federal disaster declared. Money would be awarded to the state. There would be an application period. You would submit a pre-application. We would review it at the state level. Then it would, if it's selected, it would move on to the application stage, quote unquote, sub-application. You would submit a sub-application to OEM. We would work with you to get that up to FEMA, to have them review it. And if it's awarded, then you have this 3-year period of performance to do your project. And that's essentially what that says. And we have awarded over the last few years, I would say well over 100 of these. So throughout the state. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go too much into this. I kind of just talked about it. This is just the pre-award process, or the process for getting an HMGP or an HMA grant. When the application period opens, you send in a pre-application, we review it. We invite you to submit a sub-application, which we then also review, send that up to FEMA. Next slide. FEMA reviews it. Usually takes, depending on the complexity of the project, if it's a plan update, it's usually a lot easier. If you're working in water or you're moving dirt or doing something to impact endangered species, that can take a little longer to get reviewed. So it can be a year or more to get approved. Next slide. I think this is my last slide. So let's say you apply and you get awarded $1 million. You have to come up with a portion of that. And it's typically 25%. It's not always 25%. Sometimes it's 10%. It just depends. But I would say as a standard rule, it's 75-25. And that 25% can come in a variety of ways. As you can see there. So it can be cash, it can be in kind, volunteer hours, materials, that sort of thing. And I think that is my last slide. And that was a super 10,000 foot level overview of HMA. It's a great program. OEM's got a lot of great staff now to help local governments and tribes with the application process. So check out the slide deck that I'm going to post in the chat, and I'll be available for questions later. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jason. That was terrific. Let's move on now to the fifth and final speaker in our morning session, Jillian McCarthy. Jillian has served as partnership coordinator for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board since 2016, where she manages grants that help to protect and restore healthy watersheds and natural habitats. Prior to her work at OWEB, Jillian spent 14 years working for the Non-Point Source Management Program at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Jillian.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Mark said, I'm Jillian McCarthy. I'm a partnerships coordinator with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. And if anyone is unfamiliar with OWEB, we are a small state agency that's focused on grant making to help protect and restore healthy watersheds and natural habitats. So OWEB administers a number of grant programs, But today I'm going to focus on what I think of as our cornerstone grant program. It's been around the longest and is really core to OWEB's identity. And this is our open solicitation program. I'll also give a brief overview of some other grant offerings that might be of interest today, but the focus will be on open solicitation. So open solicitation is a statewide grant program. And as a state agency, we operate on a biennial budget, so that fluctuates every 2 years. The current biennium, we had about 55 million to give out in grants through this program, and that's pretty typical each biennium. So our funding is a mix of state lottery, federal dollars, and then salmon license plate revenue. Applicants for OWEB grants must be legal entities, and that can include local or tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and then institutions for higher education. And state and federal agencies may apply for funding, but only as a co-applicant with an eligible entity. The average award amount through open solicitation can be really different depending on the project type. So the open solicitation program will fund all stages of project development if the justification can be made that the activities will ultimately lead to on-the-ground restoration. So the project types that we can fund include stakeholder engagement, technical assistance, restoration, land and water acquisitions, and monitoring. The one activity that we can't fund is general education, just to point that one out. So on the low end, we might see 25,000 to 50,000 for stakeholder engagement or other simpler project types. Technical assistance grants are limited to 75,000, and that's the only grant type that has a funding cap. And then on the high end, we might see 500,000 for a more complex restoration project, or maybe over $1 million for land acquisitions. This grant program, like most OWEB grant programs, requires up to 25% match. And this is actually a recent change to our program rules. We used to require at least 25%, and now we require an amount that is up to or shall not exceed 25% match. And this recent change was in part because of agency conversations and understanding around equity in grant making, and also just the understanding that securing match for some projects like restoration can be far easier than securing match for other types like stakeholder engagement or even technical assistance. Open solicitation operates on a regular grant cycle with an RFP that's released twice a year. So each spring and fall, a solicitation goes out for stakeholder engagement, technical assistance, and restoration project types. And then the next deadline for those grant types is May 1st. So coming right up. Acquisition and monitoring grants are offered once a year. In general, land acquisition grant applications are due in the fall, and then water acquisition and monitoring are typically due in the spring. So all of the information on typical cycle timing and then grant deadlines is updated on our website. That's down at the bottom of the screen. So as I mentioned, open solicitation is a statewide program. We don't necessarily have program priorities for funding projects that benefit specific habitat types or specific species, but we do have evaluation criteria for each grant type. And primarily those are centered around the bullets here around proposal clarity, technical soundness, watershed context, the capacity of the applicant, and cost effectiveness. So a single application doesn't necessarily have to hit the mark on all of the criteria, but reviewers are evaluating applications to see if they hit that sweet spot where OWEB can feel confident that the project will be successful. Reviewing the evaluation criteria and developing applications with that criteria in mind is my best recommendation for developing successful applications. OWEB breaks the state up into 6 regions. So as a coastal focus, the North and Mid Coast is in Region 1, and the South Coast is included in OWEB's Region 2. And each region has a technical review team that's made up of state, federal, tribal, and then other natural resource professionals. These review teams evaluate the applications, and their evaluations ultimately lead to the funding recommendations and the ranking of projects, again, based on how well an application meets the evaluation criteria. So you can move to the next slide, please. Because OWEB has so many different grant programs, I wanted to just take a moment to highlight a handful of other programs that might be of interest today. So the first is the Coastal Wetland Grant Program. This is a partnership program that OWEB manages in close coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who's actually the funder of the program. So this is a nationally competitive program. The grants provide up to $1 million for projects that involve coastal wetland acquisition or restoration, or a combination of the two. And the application deadline for this for restoration is May 1st. For acquisition will be in the fall. And a pre-application is required for any project that wants to pursue coastal wetland funding. The second program is our Focused Investment Partnership Program. So this program provides up to $4 million per biennium for up to 6 years or 3 biennia for partnerships to implement strategic action plans that are focused on an OWEB identified ecological priority. So the 7 ecological priorities are listed here. There are 2 coastal focus priorities, one around estuaries and the other around coast coho. So the next solicitation for this program will be at the end of April, and applications are due in the fall. The last 2 programs that I want to highlight are fairly unique in that they focus on supporting partnerships and on partnership capacity. And that's with the understanding that strong organizations and strong partnerships are really the workhorses for restoration work on the ground in Oregon. So the organization collaboration grants are up to $75,000 to support new or expanded strategic collaborations. And the partnership technical assistance program provides up to $150,000 to develop or enhance new strategic action plans or to support existing partnership work and implementing existing plans. The schedule for solicitations for these 2 offerings for the next biennium is currently being discussed, so I don't have timing on that for you today. And then finally, the graphic on this slide just shows how OWEB breaks the state up into regions, and then the contact information, which is tricky to see here, I realize, for each of the regional program representatives for the open solicitation program. So if anyone has questions on any of these grant programs that I mentioned today, you can reach out to me, and I can either connect you with the people you can't see listed on this graphic here for the appropriate regions, or connect you with the right folks. So with that, I will hand it back to Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Really appreciate that. All right, now that we've heard from each of our 5 speakers on this morning's panel, what I'd like to do is throw out a question for any or all of them to address. And here's the question. Now that we've just heard more about these upcoming funding opportunities, how do we make our proposals more competitive? Specifically, how can anyone briefly describe what a competitive application looks like for your program, and what traits do you most often see in projects that are able to move through the review process smoothly? Would any of our panelists like to address that question?
I can, real quick.
Okay, Jason, please go ahead.
For HMA and brick related projects for FEMA money, it needs to tie back to your natural hazard mitigation plan. So in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't have to necessarily be explicitly identified in that plan, but there has to be a link of some sort to that plan. So.
All right, thank you for that. Jillian.
Yeah, thank you. I would just reiterate for OWEB grant programs, there are evaluation criteria, and for most grant programs, there are evaluation criteria that are being looked at, that the applications are being reviewed along with. So getting a hold of the evaluation criteria and really thinking of those as you're developing your application. For OWEB, we want to understand, why is this the right project in the right place at the right time? And just being, super clear and succinct in your application responses.
Terrific. I think Andrea turned her camera back on.
Jillian said the same thing I was going to say, is to tie your grant application specific to the criteria and make it as clear as possible when you're referencing each criteria, even if you have to repeat some information. Provide maps, photos, assume the grant reviewers don't know anything about your project, and provide as much clear information to the criteria as possible.
Awesome, thanks. And Claire.
Yes, I would say the same thing. And, recognizing which programs you're actually competing nationally, even if you're applying through a state agency. So for DLCD, we look for projects that will compete on the national stage with all the other coastal management programs. And I think there was a question that I'll just address in the evaluation criteria for this program as well, because there was the criteria for this funding is aligning with the program goals, aligning with state, regional, and other conservation plan goals, addressing climate resiliency, equity inclusion, project readiness and technical merit, project costs, your leveraging, and then partnerships. So making sure your applications address those evaluation criteria.
Great information. Really appreciate all that inside scoop, if you will. Any other comments from our panelists on that question? Inside tips, things to help your proposal be more competitive.
It's not directly related to that, but I just want to make just a quick mention that the Oregon Department of Emergency Management has regional coordinators out in the field to assist you also, in addition to the staff in Salem. So look for those people. We have 2 on the call today. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves or not, but anyways, yeah, just wanted to say that. Great.
All right, at this point, I'd like to ask Kyle Gray of the Throwe Environmental Team, as he's been perusing the questions and comments on chat, if there are any questions there to address to our panelists. Kyle.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. This first one is coming in for Claire specific. Able to share a bit more about the criteria for the most competitive applications?
Yes, I think that was directed to me, and I answered that in my previous comment. So hopefully that addressed that question well.
Oh, apologies if I missed that then. All right, this next one is for Andrea. How often or do you update your priority for the OCRF funds? That's coming from Debbie Picker.
It's a great question. And we typically change priorities for the OCRF is sort of a bucket of where we get a lot of different large funding programs. But for the next 2 years, for this biennium, 23 to 25, it'll be maintained for drought, wildfire, and aquatic priorities. There is some funding outside of that. So you can always contact Charlotte if you have a $100,000 project, or you can ask her. We're not only funding it at, but that's really where the bulk of the funds for 23 and 25 will go to. Once 23, 25 is done, we reassess where all the funds come from and what those priorities are. And then every RFP will specify what priority projects will get funded. Again, there's leeway, so don't just stop if your project doesn't fit one of those 3 buckets. But it'll be probably for the next 2 years, be pretty similar to drought issues.
Great, thank you. This next one goes back to Claire. Does the grant apply to habitat and wildlife monitoring?
Hi. Yes, for restoration, for the restoration project type, you can include monitoring in that application.
Great, thank you, Claire. That is all I have for questions in the Q&A right now, but just a reminder for folks, if you'd like to drop your questions using the Q&A box, I will track them and we can get those answers live for you. But Mark, I'll toss it back to you for the time being.
All right, thank you very much, Kyle. And I really want to thank every one of our 5 panelists this morning. That was a tremendous amount of information, but all really valuable to the communities tuned into our program today. So we're a little bit early wrapping up this particular session, but I am going to go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce my colleague Joanne Throwe of Throwe Environmental, who will cover our next agenda topic. Joanne?
Hi, thanks everyone. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you can see me. Yes, I'm sitting next to Mark. We are here, as he said in his opening remarks, we're here in beautiful Coos Bay. We've had such a great opportunity the last week to meet with several of you on this webinar, and also in December we met with quite a few of you. It's been really an exciting adventure working with so many wonderful entities, nonprofits, for-profits, state entities. So far this morning's panel, I've taken a lot of notes. So hopefully our session coming up shortly on grant tips, you will stay tuned because we really want to engage some of our morning speakers here. So thanks to Mark for facilitating that session. So many of you who are on here are wondering, why is Throwe Environmental working on this webinar? Well, as Lisa explained, and I know some of you are coming on and off the call this morning and will join us with the afternoon, but just to reiterate, we are field liaisons for the National Coastal Resilience Fund. And this fund is run, you're going to hear a little bit about it. It is managed by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It is open now. We have Ariel Mayan, who is the program manager for coastal resilience for NIFWF. And I just want to tee up that she is ready because we're a little bit early. Ariel, just unmute for a second if you're ready to go.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so before you do that, I'm just going to make a plug for Ariel. So we've been starting, as field liaisons with this fund for a few years now, and Ariel has given her heart and soul as this fund started from, I think, Ariel, it was 30 million, 35 million. Now it's grown to this big, huge pot of 140 million. It's such an exciting time for coastal resilience. So I'm making that plug for all the people that Mark and I have been meeting and talking to really pay attention to the details about this. And we serve as a field liaison, so we're helping to guide questions and take feedback afterwards after this webinar is done. But Ariel is the go-to person at National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. She's awesome, amazing, and has it all under control. So Ariel, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Joanne. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the National Coastal Resilience Fund, or NCRF. So next slide. So first, I just want to kick us off with a little bit of background on NCRF. It was created by Congress in 2018 to help communities proactively deploy nature-based solutions to help them reduce risks to increasing risks from coastal hazards like rising sea level, more intense storms, erosion, or heavier rainfall events. So the NCRF received $492 million through the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last year. So we'll be putting out approximately $140 million in grants annually over the next 4 years. So our main funding partner is NOAA, but the Department of Defense also contributes to support projects that enhance the resiliency of military installations. And we also have some private partners, including Transre, Shell, and Occidental. So NCRF can support larger scale projects. We don't have caps on the amount that you can request, but we anticipate that most awards for planning and design projects will range from 100,000 to 1 million, and restoration implementation projects can go up to $10 million. We don't have a specific threshold for non-federal match, but it is expected and encouraged. Match can help demonstrate broad support of a project, and match ratios are reviewed as one criteria in the evaluation of proposals. So although, again, there's no specific match requirement, to ensure that your project is competitive, we really encourage you to look closely at the match and federal leverage that you can bring to the table in support of the project. And then some important dates to keep in mind: this opportunity is currently open. So we released our RFP on February 16th. We hosted our pre-proposal webinar last week on March 2nd, and a recording is posted on our website, which is on the slide at the bottom there. And then pre-proposals are due April 12th. And then if you're invited to submit a full proposal, those will be due in June 28th, and then decisions will be made in November of this year. So some of our program priorities, the main purpose of the NCRF is to advance the use of nature-based solutions for addressing coastal risks. So projects must advance solutions that restore habitat or mimic natural processes with the dual goals of building the resilience of communities to coastal hazards and changing environmental conditions, and enhancing habitat for fish and wildlife. So proposals should speak to all of these elements. So what is the nature-based solution that you're advancing? How will that solution build community resilience? And how the solution will result in ecological uplift for fish and wildlife. We also prioritize projects that are innovative, that consider and are sustainable in the face of changing environmental conditions, and projects that promote transferability. We also prioritize projects that benefit underserved communities, and that include direct community engagement. And we know that projects are more successful and sustainable when the community has been engaged and is an active partner on the project. So describing how the community has been and will be engaged in the development, design, and implementation of the project is very important. And then for project types, NCRF funds in 4 different project categories, which are designed to build a pipeline of resilience projects and prepare you for the next stage in your resilience efforts. Our pipeline does not guarantee that you will receive funding for the subsequent stage of the project. And there are no predetermined numbers or amount of funding that we dedicate to specific projects in each category. So the categories are on the screen here. So it's community capacity building and planning, site assessment and preliminary design, final design and permitting, and restoration implementation. And our RFP goes into specifics on the types of activities that are often supported in each category. And then our ultimate goal is to help you get your resilience project to that final stage of implementation so that you can achieve the goals of enhancing community and habitat resilience. Next slide. So for eligibility, we have a broad range of eligibility for organizations that can apply, including state, territory, and tribal governments, municipal agencies, nonprofits, universities, and even for-profit institutions. Non-eligible entities are federal agencies or employees, foreign organizations, and unincorporated individuals. There are some gray areas. So programs that have dual standing as partially federal, like Sea Grant, they can apply, but just be careful around the rules of matching funds and federal augmentation. And then eligible applicants, if they want to partner with a federal agency for implementation of the project, it's encouraged, and you should provide a letter of support if their role is going to be significant, but funding cannot be directed to a federal entity as a co-lead or a sub-award. And then for for-profit entities, while they are eligible, charges to a potential award may only include the actual costs. So recipients may not apply loaded rates or realize profit from an award. And then our geographic focus, I believe Kyle just dropped the link to our map on our website that delineates the coastal areas where we fund. These coastal areas are Huck 8 watersheds that drain to the Atlantic, Pacific Ocean, and the Gulf of Mexico and Great Lakes, and adjacent Huck 8 watersheds that are tidally influenced or particularly low-lying. And so just because we are the National Coastal Resilience Fund, that doesn't mean you have to be right next to the ocean to be eligible for funding. So we do know that what happens in the upper part of the coastal watershed affects the downstream resilience of coastal communities and ecosystems. So if you're zooming into our boundary map, you can see that we do support projects that are in the upper parts of coastal watersheds and pretty far from the ocean or Great Lake coastline. So as long as the project will help deliver the risk reduction and ecological benefits that are priorities to the program, then it'll be eligible. And if you see something, if your project area is not necessarily in that orange boundary, you can always reach out to us or put in your proposal why you think your area is considered a coastal project. Next slide. And then the last thing, I just want to highlight this restoration grant that we awarded this past November. So it's restoring 2 historic wetlands to reduce flooding, improve water quality, and freshwater habitat. So this project is going to be restoring 116 acres of agricultural property to a historical freshwater pasturine wetland in the coastal Coho Lake system in Oregon. So the project is going to restore natural functions to this priority basin, which is important salmon habitat. And this effort is going to improve resiliency of the lakes, which is important for the water quality and flood risk reduction. And then you can look on our website to see all of our past grants awarded under NCRF to get a better idea of the type of projects that we fund. And I will turn it back to Joanne.
Isn't that great? Let's since we have a few minutes, let's see if anybody has any questions for Ariel in the chat. Is that Gina Carter to everyone? Gina's the bomb, I must say. She is great at making connections all over the state. Kyle, do you want to monitor the chat and see if there's anything for Ariel?
That sounds great. So let's see here. We've got one comment coming in. Said, I heard at a recent briefing that the Coastal Resilience Fund received over 450 proposals last year and funded around 100 projects. Do you have any tips on how Oregon projects can be successful in this highly competitive pool? And what pitfalls or mistakes are most common among applicants so that we can avoid them?
Well, that is accurate. We did award around 100 grants last year. So it is a very competitive process. I would say that there are a lot of resources to use as you're developing your proposal. So Throwe as our field liaisons are super helpful. We also have a team at NIFWIF that helps out in the regions that you can contact about your proposal ideas, which are all listed on the RFP. And I believe Joanne is going to go into some of the pitfalls, but I think making it really clear to the reviewers what the community resilience and the habitat benefits are, be as clear as possible. We don't want to go digging for that information. So just make sure that's the priority in the proposal.
That's great. I don't see any other questions coming in. Kyle?
Nope, I don't see any.
All right. Well, Ariel, please stick around. Like you said, I'm going to tee up some grant tips. And so I'm asking all the funders from the earlier presentation from the state. What I'm going to do in this session, and I know we're running early. I know everybody wants a longer break for lunch. So maybe we'll end a little bit early. Or maybe this session will really open up some eyes on grant tips. So the beauty of Throwe Environmental is we're not state, we're not federal, we're not part of the philanthropic. We've been doing this quite a while. So what you're getting is tips from our team, right? This is, we do this often. We work on funding, finance, and investment of some of these climate related issues. So I like to say, been there, done that, made many of these mistakes ourselves. So we're trying to pull back the curtain a little bit. We want to give you some information to make you as competitive as possible. So just telling the state speakers, just be in the lineup if as we try to facilitate this conversation. I want this to be as helpful as possible for everybody who's listening. So Courtney, can you advance this slide? All right, so what I've done is just put together one slide and I'm going to add to this. I'm trying to do before, during, and after and break this up a little bit so you can better understand the right approach. First of all, when I would encourage everybody, when you start thinking through your idea and you're picking a project, and you heard so many great programs this morning, you're going to come back this afternoon after lunch and you're going to hear some federal programs. Don't wait for the RFP to come out and you're just trying to fit your project need into the RFP. Start working on it now. You already know what your project need is, right? You've already identified that this is a big opportunity, you need it. So start working on it. Pull your partners together, develop that idea. Think about who you need to work with in the community. I mentioned Gina Carter on here in TNC, and we've got our friends at the Tillamook Estuary Partnership and so many other great friends here on this webinar today. So many folks in the community. Start working with them. Also, one of the important pieces on many of these grant programs is that stakeholder aspect. So who needs to be at the table? Again, don't wait for that RFP, start working on it now. Start thinking through your plans for establishing your goals, your objectives, timeline, responsibilities, who's doing what, right? And when are you going to do it? It's very, very important to think through that. These reviewers, everybody from this morning and all the ones you haven't heard from yet, honestly, they have reviewed in the past many, many proposals, and they know when something isn't well organized or well written. You're not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. So as succinct, somebody this morning said, be succinct, just understand what your goals are. Where do you want to be at the end of the project when it's completed? What do you want to achieve? So then work your way backwards, okay? Make your objectives very clear. Try to be realistic on your timeline. So many proposals out there. It's like, I want the sun and the moon and the stars all in one. Be realistic, okay? So who's doing what though? Let's see who's that partnership is on your proposal and be clear about who's taking responsibility. So is this program the right for you? We heard this morning and Ariel mentioned it, who's eligible. So look it up. Don't spend the time going through and spending hours you don't have on a project, on a RFP where you're not even eligible, or there's a match and you're not quite sure what it's going to be. Just try to find if this is right for you. Is the award amount within what you need to do? And Ariel mentioned project categories. Stay within your lane, right? Stay within the category. Don't try to be everything to everyone at all times. We have connecting with your program officer. These are very busy people. We are pulling together so many. And as Lisa said this morning, it's not the end all of what's out there, but we're trying to be able to introduce you to, various funders. But many of these officers are very willing, open, and available to communicate. And what's also nice about that, and some are just so amazing with their time, some could give you a good idea, it's not quite the right thing, or, rework it and talk to us next year, or this aspect we could fund and maybe not this. So again, before an RFP is out, start working on the program, the project, what's right for you, not how does it necessarily fit exactly into that program, but try to identify what needs to happen, because all of these funders want you to be organized, okay, and succinct. You only have a certain amount of time to do it. So now, okay, you've gotten the RFP is open and you're trying to communicate that project, and this is during that RFP, you're putting your proposal together. So Ariel mentioned there's pre-proposals are out. You only have a few pages to say everything you need to say to get the interest and attention of a funder. And some of them just are full proposals. And sometimes it's 10 pages and you have so much to say. So set the tone, start setting the tone early on what you need to do, on how do you communicate. Again, be succinct, reread the proposal or the RFP over and over, just making sure are the key words they're looking for, transferability, scalability. You're trying to see what they're exactly looking for. Don't wash over that, because they're trying to be as clear with you as possible so they can get a product back that makes a lot of sense. So again, reread the RFP, Don't make it too hard for a reviewer to figure out what you're doing. Be as clear as possible. Some funds love catchy titles. Be genuine. Be careful of again, not going too far beyond what you're trying to do to sell your project, but at the same time, try to get what's going to get the attention of the funder and adapt. Now, I've said before, don't wait for the RFP, but now the RFP is out and you're saying, wow, this is such a good program. Let's say, NCRF is the perfect thing for me. I'm looking for nature-based solutions. This is the right opportunity. Let's see what this fund includes. So adapt to the grant at this point, pay attention to those keywords, and build partnerships. You have so many people. I know we have, give or take, about 80 people on the call right now. We have 140 something signed up for this webinar. Many are going to review the recording later. So this is a really exciting time. There were so many partnerships here in Oregon that you can build from. If you are missing an expertise and you don't have it, and I'm quite familiar with, obviously, NCRF, so I'm going to use that as my example here. So if NCRF is asking for resilience and impacts to fish and wildlife, and you are really strong on one end, get that partnership that could build on the other side, right? So get the partners engaged where you may be weak. In the end, partnerships are going to be, a huge win, huge opportunity to be transformational. So, okay. Now you think you're done, right? You've been working on this proposal. There's all this unprecedented amount of grant funding out there right now. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for everyone to be organized. And so what I'm looking for here to share with you is, after you're done, okay, reread it, what you've written. And, we read things or write things, and oftentimes we never see the mistakes or the gaps. Give it to somebody else, give it to a colleague. I mentioned having a very cool title. Make sure your abstract is very succinct. Taking us back to the early days of college, right? When we had to learn how to write very succinctly and make it very clear. Think about your abstract, because that's the first thing that's going to get the reviewer's attention. So then we talked about what's the criteria. There was a great question in the chat, and our team from this morning from the state answered some of the criteria and the program priorities. Do your research, because it shows in your proposal. Align it, okay? And if you don't get funded, you can often get very discouraged, and you don't ask for feedback. Why not? Why not see if you can get feedback? Because you have an opportunity to take that great proposal you've worked on, but maybe you missed the opportunity just by a little. You don't know. So go ask, get feedback, and maybe reapply the next year, because there are reasons you didn't get funded. And no matter how much money we're talking about today, you still have to compete. You still need to keep making sure you are as competitive as possible. All right, so build on those weaknesses, because we all have them in our proposals. There's something that wasn't quite perfect. So look for them and, try to build on those weaknesses. It might be a partnership. And I can tell you, sometimes we'll meet with people who have not been funded, and we go back and we give them feedback from the reviewers, and they go, no, we know how to do, that's part of it. We just didn't reiterate it enough. We didn't say that in our proposal. And you say, well, had you read the RFP, you would have seen it needs to be included. So I'm just reminding everybody, you probably have many aspects of your proposal that you could probably add. So go back to the RFP, see what exactly they're looking for. So what I want to do now, I'm giving you some of the tips, and you heard other things this morning, right? Tying the grant application to the criteria, assuming that the reviewer doesn't know anything about your program. And this is a teaching moment. So try to make it, competitive. I think it was Claire who said, try to make it competitive on a national scale. That sounds absolutely great. Make your project as, seem like it's anything you learn from this project really will be transferred to others, and help inform others. and align with those state goals. So I'm giving you some tips, only adding one slide. I want to open it up to some of the other speakers. Ariel, I'll start with you because we ended with you last, and then I'd love to see if maybe some of our federal partners from this afternoon or our state partners have tips to add. And then I also encourage my amazing colleagues who are managing this Zoom, which is Kyle Gray doing the chat, and also Courtney Green, who is managing our Zoom. And they might have some other tips to add that I did not. So Ariel, anything I might have forgotten you think would be important to share?
I think you hit most of the points. I think it's just really important to review all the materials that we've put out. I know for NCRF, we really try to put everything out on our website so you have all the information at your fingertips. We have tip sheets, FAQs, look at the past projects that we've awarded to see if what you're suggesting is in the realm of what we've funded in the past. And then work with Throwe and anybody else at NIFWIF to really develop your idea and to talk it through. And we might be able to tell you early on if it's something that's not worth submitting, or if it's something that's not quite ready for this round. Like I said, we're going to have this elevated funding for a few more years. So there's an opportunity to still get the proposal and grant in next year if it's not quite ready.
And Ariel, don't turn off your camera just yet, because we had a great conversation about budgets recently, right? And I know the other speakers hopefully will chime in, but sometimes, especially on pre-proposals, people rush the budget, right? And they're saying, let's see, I can refine it and do a better job if I get asked for a full proposal. But take the time, my guidance, and Ariel, you can confirm or deny this, but my guidance is typically, do a good job of developing an accurate budget. If you get asked for a full proposal and it's way off and you have to change it by so much, you have some questions to answer. Why? Any pointers on the budget, developing a budget?
Yeah, I think at the pre-proposal for NCRF, it's just the top line budget number. So be as intentional with that number as you can and have that developed internally. And we won't see it at the pre-proposal, but there is an opportunity to change the budget from pre to full. But like you said, Joanne, if that number triples or something, that's going to raise a lot of questions. So just be considerate of that as you're developing your proposal. And one thing, you can add elements to your proposal, especially if you're getting feedback from the reviewers going into the full proposal, and that can inflate the budget. But that's okay. And we understand that. So don't be hesitant as well to increase the budget if you are brought to a full proposal.
Great. Thank you. Okay. And Kyle, were there any questions in the chat or comments from any funders who may be listening, and tips you'd like to share? Because we want everybody to be as successful in Oregon as possible.
Yeah, so we do have one comment in the chat here, and I think it's one I'd really like to build on too. Someone said, to use the evaluation methodology to drive the project design. So build your proposal with the end in mind. Think about the RFP or the grant solicitation, whatever it's called, and look for ways to develop models or frameworks as a way to structure your project against the criteria that the grant reviewers will be using to review and score your proposal. And I really just want to drive that point home. And I know it's one that you mentioned, Joanne, but this is something that we hear a lot, especially with NCRF. I would say pay attention to the keywords in the RFP, what's repeated over and over again, and treat the RFP like a rubric and almost score yourself to, put yourself in the reviewer's shoes to decide, would I give myself a 5 out of 5 on this? Did I make a compelling enough case? And I would really also make sure that you're, especially when it comes to nature-based solutions, that you're really leveraging the different benefits of a nature-based solution that are relevant for this specific grant that you're applying for. So where so many of these projects have dozens of co-benefits, you can highlight those co-benefits, but make sure those that are really central to the grant opportunity are the ones that are shining through. So just something to pay attention to. But nothing else in the chat right now, and I would open it back up to any of the other funders from this morning or from the afternoon.
Thanks, Kyle. Any comments? You can unmute from funders from this morning.
I have, I guess, some tips to throw
Thanks.
out.
Go ahead.
So yeah, Joanne, you really got my brain jogging with some tips. So I wanted to also say that if you start early, like my position, I'm a technical assistance position. And so right now with March 22nd being the deadline, I don't have that much time. But if you were to be working with me in June, I have so much more time to work with you on your project, and you know, kind of it helps organize the project in a way. And also, I think we've heard a lot about partnering up with others. It really seems to build an application when you have other applicants with you to work on a, you know, more of a regional scale. And so when you have more time, there's, I think, clearer thought and more intentional thought, which would make you have a stronger project. And I also wanted to put out that we want to help. Again, I'm a technical assistance person. I want to see each project get funded. That's the goal. And so I'm always available to help. That's the beauty about the position I have in the DEQ. So I'm in the Drinking Water Protection Program, and we have other staff, you know, that's our job to help and help water systems achieve you know, funding for their projects to ultimately help secure drinking water protection. And if you don't ask, we won't know. So again, I think we said at the beginning, no question is dumb, and we're all here to learn. And so yeah, if you don't ask, or even if you don't apply, if you apply and, you know, we see that, oh, there's a lot of requests, we will go and try to find more budget to really I think bolster the availability of funds that we have. And so and I think that leads into to not get discouraged if you aren't funded, and to ask for tips and you know, why you weren't, I guess, chosen, because it could just be that somebody else applied the year before and then they applied again and had a really strong application because they've already gone through. And so I wanted to put those out. And then the last thing is I'm currently working on a coastal conference or a gathering. So the DEQ with EPA had a coastal conference this past October. And to build off that excitement, we're trying to put out, I think, like this coastal gathering and really have these sustainable meetings where people can come and ask questions. And I'm working with a few other partners in the areas of like Newport and Coos Bay, and we want to have one in the North Coast. And these are meant to be spaces where come and meet others who are also in your same position, because we know each system, no matter how big and or how small, everyone has to go through this process. And so really, if we can collaborate and make things easier, then we can all be much more successful. And so if anyone is interested, we're hoping to have more information. We're in the planning phase of these coastal gatherings, but we're really excited. We're hoping to have the first one sometime in April, maybe May. But there is a lot of technical assistance out there, and I think it's just finding those connections, and then you know, I think building off those relationships and yeah, partnerships. So I think that's
Alyssa, thank you. Those were great. That was great. Hey, before you turn your camera off, Alyssa, how about you know, we get this. So I only know NCRF for these programs and innovation. People often say, do we only need the tried and true? So could we, you know, on your funds that you're talking about, is there, do you open it up to innovative approaches? Is there any flexibility on that?
I think we're always looking for flexibility. So if you come to us with a project and it's not exactly fitting what maybe a fund is looking for, that's one of the things that I'm supposed to help with, is technical assistance and helping you achieve your project. And so, or project fund to get it funded. And so I think, yeah, we're always looking for innovation. And the other thing is I sent a resource document, which should be, I think, attached to this this meeting. We have I think a 10-page document where for the Coastal Conference, we highlighted several different grants. And so I only presented 2, but in this resource document, we have several. And so if your project doesn't fit one, it's my job to try to have the feelers out for other grants. And so if you're telling me about a project, and you're thinking about going after the partnership fund, it might be that you are more suited for 319 or something else that I know about, but you may not know about. And so asking those questions, I think, is the best thing that you can do, especially if you have, a technical assistance. And I know the DQ is a special little program that we have. And so the other thing is we try to keep up with other state agencies and know what else is out there. And so at least for the Department of Environmental Quality, the Drinking Water Protection Program, we have staff that, it's our goal to know as much as we can, know a little bit about a lot, and really try to, focus on drinking water protection. So hopefully, Joanne, kind of answered the question. But
That was great. I appreciate it. How about some of the other funders from this morning, our state folks? Anybody want to add any more comments that Alyssa or myself didn't add?
I'll add a couple.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. So, we work with the FEMA money that comes through, and that can be large amounts of money. And don't be afraid of the process. I know it may look like, a big, gnarly bunch of red tape coming from FEMA, but we're here to help you with that. And we've been super successful at getting millions of dollars out to communities across Oregon. We want your communities to be more resilient to natural hazards. And our goal is to make sure we don't have huge wildfires like we did a couple years ago, or if we have a big earthquake, Cascadia subduction quake, that your community is more resilient. So reach out to the regional coordinators in your area from the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and reach out to the SHMO, Anna Feigum, and others, because you don't have to wait until there's a disaster to prepare an application. Look at your natural hazard mitigation plan. Every county, city, and tribe has one, essentially. Some are expired, some aren't, most aren't, 90% aren't. But look at those, and it lists all the things that you can do, all the mitigation actions that you can take, all the projects that FEMA will fund. And look at those and talk to us, and we'll help you put together an application and get it ready so that when funding is available, we're ready to go. So reach out to us. There's money out there. The federal government, the state government does not want your communities to be vulnerable to those natural hazards. So.
All right, that's great. So Jason, keep your camera on. You now you get to know me when I start to pick on people and endure it for a while.
Okay.
So let me ask you something else. If people are applying, and are you able to, and they're in the pipeline, right? You've gotten them 1 year. Is there an opportunity you think they're probably more than likely to get future funding because they're starting to be in the pipeline for certain funding? Or is that not the case with your funding?
So are you talking about the state as a whole, or an individual applicant?
Well, individual programs, I mean, beyond BRIC, and once you're in the pipeline, I mean, some of these are likely to see continual funding. And I'm just wondering, on things you talked about this morning, if people get in and they get some funding, can they expect
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
The HMA program is tied to disasters.
it's
So
just,
unfortunately, there has to be something that, like COVID.
tied it to.
So COVID came along and it was a presidentially declared disaster. And that opened up a ton of money for the state of Oregon for, doing all sorts of things unrelated to COVID.
Mhm.
But it opened up FEMA money to retrofit schools for earthquakes, stuff like that. Like I said, there's nothing open right now on the HMA side. I'm not sure about the PA, the public assistance side. That's a different thing, but I put the number on the slide for who to contact. But the BRIC program is open every year, and that's competitive. It essentially does the same thing, but it's a little harder to get that money because it is nationally competitive.
That's right. Thank you, Jason. How about anybody else as we wrap up this grant tip session? Any of our other funders want to chime in? And I won't put anybody on the spot if you don't want to. All right, not seeing anyone else. Here's what I'd like to do now. First of all, I'm going to ask Lisa in just a couple minutes to close us out for the morning session. We're giving you back a little longer lunch. Hopefully you'll enjoy it and relax, and then join us back this afternoon. And I do want to let you know that we will be sending you a survey, a short survey. So if you are not coming back later today, we'll send you something. We'd love to get your feedback. And it's not for NIFWIF or DLCD or anybody. It's for all of us as who contributed something to this webinar to see if we hit the mark. Was this worthwhile? Are things, if this ever happens in the future, are things we should change about it, things you'd like to know. So just keep an open mind on that. So Lisa, before I give instructions for what we're doing at lunch, why don't you just close this out for the morning?
Sure. So first off, I'd like to thank everybody that presented. That was fantastic. I got a few notes sent directly to me that I think will show up in your survey. It was pretty fast. There was a lot of information, and knowing that these slides will be available, I think, is comforting to some folks. It's going to give them just some time to sit back and reflect on it a little bit more on their own pace. So, but it's good to have heard the verbal presentation, and now when they're looking at what the slides are, I think that's going to be very helpful for folks. So I think some takeaways that everyone should walk out of here with. One, SHMO is perhaps the best acronym out there. Two, everybody that spoke today emphasized how important it was and how receptive they were to having people reach out early. So that wasn't them just being gracious in a public setting. It's true, it makes everybody's lives easier. So take them up on it. And I think the third piece here that I heard was partnerships. The bigger and the broader the collaboration, the stronger the project. And as you probably noted, in some instances, and you'll certainly hear that later today, in some instances, the applicant has to be a very specific entity. And so really making sure that you understand all of the different criteria is going to be important, and that you have all the right people at the table to help move that project forward. So just take what you heard today to heart. And this afternoon, you're going to hear a little bit different take from the federal side. But what you'll continue to hear regardless is reach out and ask us. So those are our takeaways this morning. Jan's going to take us through what happens after lunch, and then we'll let everybody go.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa. And again, thank you to all the presenters this morning. So what's going to happen if you're joining us? I hope you stay on for this afternoon session, hearing from the feds, and then you have time to go individually into breakout rooms and get specific on your questions that you might not have felt comfortable giving in the chat. And we'll go through those instructions later on today. If you are leaving us, know that, as Lisa said, this was a snapshot of, what's going on out there. We certainly would love to do a deeper dive, but, we're doing the best we can today. Keep yourselves muted. Keep your camera
check out
off. And that's just an example. Somebody wasn't muted. So keep it all off because you want to enjoy your lunch in peace. We're going to come back. We're going to have a timer. Courtney's going to put a timer on. We're going to come back in an hour. If the federal panelists can join a few minutes before, so I can see that they are on the screen, that would be terrific. But go ahead and just enjoy your lunch. Come back a few minutes. We're going to start exactly at 1, so come back a few minutes before, so we know you're in the room. And then we'll go through some announcements later today. Courtney, I don't think I forgot anything else, but you can unmute and tell me if you did. Thank you, everybody. Have a great lunch. All right, so welcome back. We are going to talk for the next hour about federal opportunities. We spoke this morning about state funding and philanthropic funding with National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. There was a lot of information that was shared. And I just want to take a moment and remind everyone, we knew we could not get into detail on every program. We wanted to offer the time in the afternoon to have time individually with funders, and we'll describe that process in their breakout rooms after we hear from the federal panel. But this is just a chance for you to hear what's going on and focus on coastal resilience. We do recognize you're probably looking for PowerPoint presentations and other information to be shared, and give us time to coordinate all this. We're going to get it back out to you as soon as possible. If you're registered, you'll hear from us. And again, I mentioned it on the morning session, you'll be getting a little a survey. So we'd appreciate you just take a moment and let us know if this was helpful. We just want it for future use to be able to share with the state agencies and federal agencies who are part of our event today. So we really want to make sure we were able to have an impact for you. And so I'm asking my colleague, we said this morning, we're in Coos Bay, and I'm joined by my colleague in this conference room by Mark Belton, program partner with Throwe Environmental, and he is going to tee up our afternoon panel, federal panel, and then we'll have time for a good Q&A. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Joanne. Welcome back, everyone. Hope everybody had a great lunch. I'll be facilitating our afternoon panel discussion called Navigating Federal Programs and Resources. And just like this morning, I'm going to ask one overall question and ask each of our panelists to go ahead and respond to it in 10 minutes or so. That question, it's really a 5-part question. It's unfair to say it's one question, but the question is this: from your agency's perspective, please briefly describe 1 or 2 upcoming funding opportunities. And what we'd really like to know is what it is and how much money is available. When do you anticipate the RFP coming out? Is there a match required, or is this something that can be used as match for other grant programs? Are there any type of partner training sessions available in 2023? And who is the target audience for your funds? Landowners, partners, etc. Also, just like this morning, please, if you're attending the webinar, put any questions you have for our presenters in the chat. At the end of the presentations, our Throwe environmental colleague, Kyle Gray, will pose questions from the chat to our speakers. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first speaker this afternoon is Jessica Edwards. Jessica is Program Manager for NOAA Restoration Center's Community-Based Restoration Program. Jessica has been with NOAA since 2008 and has a master's degree in environmental policy and a bachelor's degree in marine biology. Jessica.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I don't typically like presentations that have this many words on a page, but I also know that they were planning to provide this afterwards, so I wanted to make sure everyone got all of the information. So I'm just going to briefly kind of chat about 4 funding opportunities that we ran this past year in 2022 based on the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. And we do plan to run these 4 competitions again in 2023. And likely will be very similar to what we put out last year. So you might see some small changes or tweaks to potential ceiling levels or things like that. But I would say that project types and priorities will likely stay very similar. So this has most of the information that I think was asked for. So this initial pot of money was for fish passage through barrier removal. And so that pot of money is split. So we have a national fish passage competition, which you see the information here. And then I'll get to a future slide that has our tribal fish passage funding. And so for our national fish passage funding, which tribes are also welcome to apply to, this past year we had an award ceiling of $15 million and a floor of $1 million. Typical projects that were awarded ranged between $2 to $5 million. There is at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a link, and that has the web story of all the projects that we funded this past year through this fish passage competition. It includes both our national and tribal fish passage awards. There is no match required, but we do have some point values in our evaluation criteria related to match or leverage. So that is encouraged but not required. We included the word leverage in these funds because we thought it was important to allow applicants to include all different funding types that might come into a project, not just the non-federal funds. And so leverage allows an entity to include anything and everything. And because it's not required, then you can also use those funds for other funding opportunities that might have a match requirement. Also happy to talk to people if they have questions about what match or leverage means later. We do anticipate our 2023 funding opportunity for our fish passage funding opportunities to come out in spring of 2023. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be able to post that on grants.gov. So if anyone subscribes, you'll already see that kind of information. We also we'll continue to update our own website on our fisheries.noaa.gov website that will provide information about timelines for when it will be open and then close dates, etc. For both of the tribal and national fish passage, we did include a definition, which is the same for both funding opportunities. And our focus for these funds are really on fish passage for native and migratory sea-run fish that can move through barriers under their own power. So that volitional component and that kind of up and down allowance of movement of fish across a barrier. We allow various types. So dam removal is kind of the preferred type, but also allow for culvert removal and or modification at nature-like fishways, as well as technical fish ladders. You can propose a variety of activities if they meet the award or funding levels. So and you can combine things in terms of if you want to do a restoration project on the ground, but also include some assessment or design for another project. We typically fund multiple activities under one award that allows you to get to different projects at different phases, whether it's feasibility, design, implementation, all those different types of things. And of course, we do have some monitoring that's also part of our projects. We have a stronger focus on stakeholder engagement, especially related to underserved communities, in trying to kind of build the capacity of new and existing partners in this space. So we've had a stronger focus on that as well. Our program priorities are listed here. Again, a focus on kind of lasting benefits for migratory fish populations, regionally important habitat restoration projects, trying to enhance community resilience to climate hazards and other co-benefits, even some socioeconomic benefits related to resilience. And again, trying to engage with underserved communities, including partnerships with tribes. So those were the focuses, which I think will remain largely the same focus in our next funding opportunities. Next slide. So tribal is very similar. There are a few differences here. The award amounts, $5 million ceiling and a $300,000 floor. Again, you can learn more about our projects on our website. Again, we anticipate a spring release date. We have a little bit of a different focus on program priorities. One of them is related to fostering tribally important barrier removal that benefits migratory fish, and including and increasing tribal organizational capacity. So capacity was a component that we allowed for under the tribal as well. So we thought that was important to highlight. Next slide. So just very specifically for the tribal, we wanted to just highlight that for this past year, and we might tweak our eligibility a little bit, but for the most part, we are going to have it be explicit for Indian tribes that are Indian tribes and tribal commissions and consortiums. So much like we had in this past year, it was for federally recognized tribes. So you'll likely see something similar in this next round of having federal recognized tribes for this one. And then for other opportunities, it's open to any kind of tribal entity. Next slide. So this was our transformational habitat restoration and resilience. We had approximately $85 million for this past year. Award ceiling was 15 million, floor $1 million. Again, no match requirement, but we did have evaluation criteria around either match or leverage. And we do anticipate that this one will also come out around early summer of 2023. We had a lot of questions about what transformational means for this. And really, transformational can mean a variety of things. We've talked about it in terms of catalyzing new projects in a particular area, being a capstone project where you're kind of finally able to finish some projects in a watershed, or some more innovative ideas that we haven't typically been able to fund due to reduced funding levels or just the target kind of funding and restoration that we were looking at. So this kind of opens the door for a lot of different types of projects, and it's kind of been an exciting opportunity to see what's come through the door. We hope to announce all of our selected projects in the next couple of weeks, so we're excited about that. Here, the focus is on coastal, marine, and estuarine areas, really benefiting, again, species and fisheries species in particular. Lots of, again, projects that can be combined together. It can be one large-scale restoration project, or it can be different smaller components. You could have smaller restoration projects bundled together. The key is for them to all kind of be connected in some way within a watershed, so you're kind of showing that impact in a local way. I think that has all the information here. Next slide. This one was exciting because this was one we have not done before. This was our coastal habitat restoration resilient grants for underserved communities. And so we had an award ceiling of $1 million and a floor of $75,000. And this had less of a focus on fisheries. It was more focused on what different communities might need in terms of restoration where they are, and kind of meeting these different entities where they are. So much more open to assessment work, feasibility, just capacity building, and allowing different communities to participate in habitat restoration in a way that they haven't been able to in the past. And so this was just, we thought was a great opportunity to support these communities that may not always have a voice at the table, and to allow them to start to participate. So you'll kind of see here, again, focused on habitat restoration, but less of a focus on fisheries. And really, I guess, with a goal of just trying to meet communities where they are and depending on what their needs might be. One of the other questions that came up was just kind of, what does it mean to be successful? I would say one of the things to pay attention to is don't assume that anyone knows anything about your project or your location. So We've had partners come in where they don't do as well because they just assumed that the reviewers knew who they were in their project. And so just remembering you might be putting a proposal forward that reviewers have not seen before. And so making sure you include all the relevant background information and the important components there. We have lots of regional contacts in the Restoration Center. So when in doubt, we usually ask people to talk to our folks in the region, since they usually can provide good input into whether or not we're a good fit for them for providing funding, or if there are other opportunities regionally or nationally based that might be a better fit for their project type, or just to give some various input into some of their ideas. Other key thing is just to look at the evaluation criteria. They're pretty well outlined in terms of how the point values work and the different types of things that we're looking for. And so usually when people ask us, should we apply, we usually tell them, check the evaluation criteria. And if you're feeling like you can say yes and really address a lot of those questions, then usually, we will never say no, don't apply, but it usually means you'll have a better opportunity. I think that's it. I think the next slide just had what we were talking about in terms of eligibility for underserved communities, just for people to pay attention to. We don't have kind of we're not really checking. We're mostly asking people to self-identify if they are an underserved community. Again, we've closed our competition, but we didn't see any issues with how people came in, either partnering with an underserved community or showing how they are an underserved community. But any questions there, happy to answer in the future. And then I think there might be just one more slide that just has a few details on how to get more information. We're one piece of NOAA that got the BIL funding. And so I think you can find more information about our other opportunities, as well as other NOAA related opportunities if people have more questions. I didn't really talk much about the one that's very specific to the West Coast, the PCSRF funding that just closed yesterday, but hopefully many of you are already familiar with the Pacific Salmon funding as well. And I think that's all I have.
All right, thanks very much, Jessica. We really appreciate it. Please stick around a little bit while we go through the rest of the panel discussions for some questions here I'll have at the end. And speaking of questions, I want to make sure all the attendees this afternoon are reminded to go ahead and put your questions in chat. And my colleague Kyle Gray will pose those questions at the end of after all the panelists have spoken. So let's go ahead and move to our second panelist on the federal panel this afternoon, Shelley Timmons. Shelley is the Senior Grants Management Specialist for the Oregon-Washington State Bureau of Land Management. She has been with BLM for 13 years, the last 7 working as a grants management specialist. Shelley lives with her husband and 2 labs in Richland, Washington, where she enjoys the sunshine, outdoor activities, and beautiful views. Shelley.
Hello, everyone. There I am. I didn't know if I was working yet. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation to come and speak about our programs. My slides are going to be really quick and very information packed, because we have quite a few funding opportunities that are currently out and available, and they are broad in spectrum. So what we do is we have programmatic funding opportunities based on, fisheries or weeds or plants or, all the different program areas. And we create them really broadly to just encompass pretty much any idea that someone can come up with. They can submit a proposal for. There are certain requirements that are all listed in each of the individual notice of funding opportunities. And it's important to pay attention, very close attention to the objectives that we're looking for. Make sure that you hit on those so that we can be sure and qualify you. Everything goes through a merit panel review, and the applications either meet our requirements, don't meet our requirements, or exceed our requirements. So we can award to all if they all meet, if we have enough funding. And as we all know, there's a lot of money out there right now that we're going to try and spend. The funding amounts vary by program area, and that comes down from the national level to the states, then to the district. So I couldn't really give you a a funding amount per se, but that again is listed in the program or in the notice of funding opportunity. There's only one type of award that we do that requires a match, and that's the Public Land Corps Act Youth Awards. And if you're working with a youth crew, you have to apply through the youth master, and you have to match up to 25% or 25%. The rest of them are not required, but they are encouraged, and it could help if there was like just a little bit of money left and we were trying to decide who to spend it on. Somebody who had, partners or match involved there would probably get a little bit, encouraged a little bit more. The program opportunities that we have out now, like I said, they're all still out. We have rolling cutoff dates because we're required to have them out for 60 days minimum. And then we found oftentimes that didn't give people enough time to gather all the information they need. So we have at least one more cutoff date 30 days later, and sometimes two, depending on when we get the announcements out. So you should have plenty of time to get all your information together and apply. I will add this note. I don't think anybody has asked this question, but if you have an idea for a proposal and you want to apply, don't wait till the last day of the application period. Apply as soon as you can, because if you run across any difficulties on that last day, we don't have any flexibility. We can't extend it for you or accept it by mail. You have to have it in and on time. So I recommend you get it done early, if not, if at all possible. The program priorities are all, they range as well, depending on if it's fisheries you're talking about, wetlands, or if you're doing invasive species. There's different specific priorities to the program areas, but all of our notice of funding opportunities are also going to meet all of our Department of Interior priorities, which I put a link to on my slide, and I think that is in the chat as well. And then also they're driven by legislative authorities. So like I said, the Public Land Corps Act, that authority only works for us on a youth agreement. But then there's FLTMA, I never can remember the whole acronym, Federal Land, let's see. Oh, I didn't even write it down. Anyways, it hits most of our agreements. If you have any trouble specifying like any of the other watershed authority or some other authority, FLTMA will probably cover it. So we usually offer that on all of our NOFOs. There's another authority that's the Good Neighbor Authority, and we only offer that that is only allowed to be offered to states, counties, tribes, and so that's why I didn't list that one here, because it's kind of specific in that way. But it is out there, and if that's something that if you're a state, county, or a tribe, then there is an opportunity you can apply to. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. Inside each of the notice of funding opportunities, we have a list of all of the contacts for each area. There's a state lead, and then there's one for each of the districts or the areas that might be funding anything in any of these areas. So you can speak to them directly if you have programmatic questions. If you have funding questions, like actually filling out the form type questions, those you can refer to me, and my name's in the notice of funding opportunities as well. And you can ask questions about, how do I do this form or that kind of thing. But specific programmatic questions, you're going to want to reach out to the appropriate person in the area that you're applying to. I think you can go to the next. Oh, one more thing on this slide. You can go back. You can go to that one. It's fine. All of our funding opportunities are posted on grants.gov. There's a link on the slide for that as well. And if it gets applied to in a different platform like Grant Solutions or something, we can't accept that application. So you have to go to grants.gov, and you can search for any of the names in the funding opportunity, which are listed on one of those slides, and do a search, and it'll pull up everyone that's available, and you can then filter it by state and find what you have for Oregon, Washington. We can only fund nonprofits with our financial assistance for BLM. sorry, that's not, I didn't say that right. We cannot fund for-profits through financial assistance at BLM. We can fund state agencies, tribes, institutions of higher education, and nonprofits, but not for-profits. And then the geographic focus is just Oregon and Washington. And if in several of our notices, there'll be a language that says it can be used on BLM land or on BLM lands or adjacent to BLM lands. So sometimes there's even a private land next to BLM land, but there's some weed work that needs to be done. We can fund that even though you're going to be doing work on off of the BLM land, as long as it's specified in that funding opportunity. And I think that that's all I have for you. And if you have more questions, I'll be in the chat rooms later and be happy to talk about specifics. But there was just too much to put on 2 slides.
Thank you, Shelley, very much. That was terrific. I'm sure you'll get a lot of questions in the breakout sessions later. And again, reminder to all of our attendees, if you have questions for our federal program panelists this afternoon, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And after the presentations, Kyle will be posing those questions to our panelists. This being baseball season and spring training being in full swing, it's only appropriate that we have a pinch hitter come up this afternoon. I'm going to introduce Lisa Phipps from Oregon's own Department of Land Conservation and Development, who's going to share an update on 2 funds from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service since they were unable to participate in the program this afternoon. Lisa.
Great, thank you, Mark. We have 2 programs that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service thought might be relevant for today's discussion. And the first is the National Coastal Wetlands Conservation. Oh, goodness. Well, if we can wait just one moment, that'll quit ringing. I'm sure everybody on here gets an occasional call from spam risk. Okay, so the first is the National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant Program. And as you can see here, this is really a partnership with the state of Oregon through the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. And I believe Jillian touched on this morning. But as you can see here, this was established to acquire, restore, and enhance wetlands in coastal states. It's a competitive process, and OWEB is the only way that a partner can apply for a grant through this program. Excuse me. And I do have just a little bit more information that I want to call out on it. The RFP came out last week. The request for proposals came out last week, and applications are due June 23rd. For land acquisitions going through OWEB, ideas would have had to have been submitted to them last June and already be partway through the process. So this is a lengthy process, and I think the value here is knowing that you need to be working on projects at least a year out in order to make it through this process. OWEB partners proposing restoration projects, however, should be doing pre-consultations with OWEB this month and next. So this month being March and April. There are some other agencies that do not have preset schedules, and those would be Department of State Lands, Parks and Rec, and ODFW. And Chris Swenson is the lead for this, and he'd be thrilled to discuss any projects with folks. He is asking state agencies who will be applying for these dollars to have drafts to him by May 1st, and comments will be back from him by May 23rd. And as I stated earlier, OWEB coordination is required. So that's the first one. And then the second one is the bipartisan infrastructure law funding, which we've already heard a lot about. And this is just yet another pot. And this is for their National Fish Passage Program. $200 million went into this pot of money. Now, if anyone has been actively engaged in fish passage projects and looking at long-term solutions, $200 million, while a lot, certainly can be spent pretty quickly. So for some additional information on that, this notice of funding opportunity is closed for fiscal year 2023, but it will be offered again next year. They really encourage folks to read the background info and the NOFO that can be found on their website, and we can also send those to you as well. The individual, the contact for this program is Amy Horseman, which many of you are probably familiar with if you've done any FISP passage work in the state. The program's background is that this is going to be for 5 years. It applies to FISP passage projects and technical assistance. So that's a nice feature of this program, much like the one that is running through the coastal management program from NOAA. These funds are distributed to the services geographic regions. And so for 23, the dollar set aside was $38 million, to give you an idea of how much money is going to be coming into our area. So that's a lot of money, but again, it can be spent very quickly. She wanted to let folks know that there were 107 projects submitted nationally during this last go around. The request was over $82 million. There were a lot of partners in Oregon looking for these dollars. There were 31 letters of intent, and out of Oregon alone, the request total out of those 31 letters was $15.5 million. There were 75 letters of intent from the Pacific region in general, and that includes Idaho, Oregon, Washington, those resulted in the receipt of 65 full proposals at a total value of over $65 million. So again, some of those projects did not get funded, but a fair number of them did. And so that is pretty exciting. Much like NOAA right now, they cannot offer what all of those dollar amounts were and what each projects are yet, but that will be noticed soon if it isn't already in progress. So those are the two programs. We'll put Amy's contact information in there and Chris Swenson's for you to have access to. And I'm really sorry that they couldn't be here, because I'm sure there are a ton of questions. These are real dollars, that folks have been accessing on some level, for a long time. It's just the amount of money that's available that makes these particularly exciting over the next 5 years. I'm also going to just take a quick second to talk about the EPA and some of the pots of money that they have available. They also weren't able to make it, but they are a huge partner in the conservation conversation, and they've received over $50 billion to put back out into grants. When I was speaking to Anthony Barber, he is with EPA, and I'll put his contact information in there. This amount of money tripled their budget and tripled it as pass-through dollars. So they've got to not only create the program, but then it comes directly back out to the partners. And so there were two things he wanted to make sure I told you. One, in order to apply for these grants, you need to be on sam.gov. That's a website that you need to go and you need to enroll in. If you're not enrolled in SAM, you cannot apply for these grants. The other piece is a lot of the information is available on grants.gov. It's been having a little bit of trouble keeping up with all of the changing dynamics associated with these pots of money, but it is generally up to date. And you can also go to their website, which outlines the bipartisan infrastructure law and the way that the dollars have been distributed. It is right now, he thought what was most relevant are two pieces. The Columbia Basin Restoration Grant opportunity is available for any projects in the Columbia River Basin, and it is open to the whole cast of characters who are doing restoration and acquisition work in the Columbia Basin. And then also there's a pot of money that is available for the National Estuary Programs, of which we have 2 in this state, Tillamook Estuaries Partnership and the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. So working with them and those regions would be a great opportunity for you if they're open to additional projects. And then there's a whole slew of drinking water and clean water revolving state loan funds that are available that you will want to partner on with a local jurisdiction. So I will put his contact information in there. But again, he was sorry he could not be here today too. I see a bunch of chat questions popping up. Okay, so I'll get that in there and give this back to Mark.
Thank you, Lisa. That was great. I'm sure our friends at EPA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service really appreciate you passing that information along. I know all the attendees on the webinar today sure do. At this point, I've got a few questions I'd like to pose to our panelists. Jessica, Shelley, and Lisa, please feel free to participate as well. The first question, and this is for any of you, please describe what a competitive application looks like to your programs and what traits do you most often see in those projects that get funding. Who'd like to go first?
This is Jessica. I can start. So our competitions are pretty different. So we have kind of the fish passage competition, and then we have our coastal resilience, community and coastal resilience competitions. And I would say in both cases, the proposals that do the best are the ones that are the most responsive to our evaluation criteria. I mean, we have, importance and applicability, scientific and technical merit, we have kind of budget, and then we have kind of community outreach. So we have 4 or 5 main categories, and those usually don't change much from year to year. And so I would say as proposals can be responsive to the evaluation criteria, and of course the priorities that are outlined in the funding opportunities. So I think those are the kind of critical things. And really, again, as people have questions about their specific project, I just think reaching out to us to talk through it is also a great way to see how to make improvements, or if we're the right agency for them, or other opportunities that might be out there. So those are probably just some quick tips that might help.
Terrific, thanks. Anyone else? Lisa.
Yeah, when I was speaking to Tony, one of the things that he said, and this may be true for some of the other federal agencies as well, is EPA has so many pots of money. And so one of the things that he strongly suggested is reaching out, in this case, to him. And if he's not the right person, he'll send you to the right person. But to sit down, listen to what your project is, and then identify the best source of funding that will apply to it. He said, rather than trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, let's find the square hole, so that we are lining you up with the most likely candidate with the most likely pot of money for the type of project that you're proposing. So again, that early interaction with the funder seems like it's really important.
And I'll echo what both Jessica and Lisa said, which is why we put all of our program leads or our program contact information in our notices of funding opportunity, because it's vital that you reach out to them, and they can tell you what kinds of projects that are most interesting to us right now, and help you kind of guide what you're looking for. Plus, if you're doing something that might cover fuels and also plant life, there might be a couple of opportunities you could apply to for different types of things. So reach out.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. A second question for this panel. There is much confusion about the bipartisan infrastructure law and other federal funding programs. Do you have any guidance for applicants to help with deciphering what programs make the most sense for them to pursue?
Well, good luck. No, Well, a little bit of good luck. There's a little bit of that in there. One of the things that is going to be happening in the state of Oregon, and this will be happening in any of the coastal states that have coastal management programs that applied for it anyway, is we are bringing on a individual to assist us to manage the program that Claire talked about earlier in the day. But that person is also going to be able to act at the state level as sort of that conduit to funnel folks to the right place. Now, we're not going to make that decision for you, what pot of money is best for you, but we're going to help move you into the correct direction for the type of project that you're proposing. And it may be that it's several pots. You don't have to limit yourself to just one. I think it's really important that, and then there's this great comment in here, ODFW is also maintaining a web page that is helping to identify natural resource related grant opportunities for BIL. So I think there's a lot of resources available and becoming available, but it is a work in progress, and I'm sure Shelley agrees with that too.
And I would say even for fish passage in particular, a bunch of the federal agencies, NOAA, Fish and Wildlife Service, others are also putting together a website to help navigate all the various fish passage funds that are coming through the BIL. So that should be a way to help, again, people not help you choose, but at least see what your options are. And again, I'll say it again, but our regional contacts, whether it's with Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA, whomever, they are critical because they know, and they can also just say, hey, Fish and Wildlife Service might be the better fit, or DOT might be the better fit. And so I can't stress enough how important those regional folks are in terms of they're on the ground, they know what's happening, and I think they are the best kind of operators to help plug you into potential other opportunities that might be out there. So, so there's that. We also, anyone that did apply for our NOAA funding through Habitat Restoration, we're doing feedback sessions for anyone that was not successful. And sometimes that's also an opportunity where we can give more information about other funding opportunities that might be available to you. So that's another way to think about it. But yes, we agree there's a lot out there. We're still figuring it out in real time too. So along with all of you.
Yeah, the other benefit of reaching out to those the regional folks is they can also act as advocates. I mean, getting them on board early and being a partner in the process. They know what their agency is looking for. There's a lot of value. There's a lot of value in it.
Okay, great. I've got one more question before we go to the chat questions. And Kyle, how do we best leverage the expertise of partners on this webinar today? For example, how can partners gathered on Zoom better coordinate their proposals and interests to our federal funders?
I'll jump in. I don't think you can say it enough, but we spend a lot of time and a lot of different people put information into our funding opportunities, and we try to give you everything you need right there in one place. So if there isn't an answer to your question in there, then there's a contact you can reach out to get the answer, but it should all be there for you.
All right.
Yeah, we help too a little bit with trying to, I wouldn't say play matchmaker, but especially, again, we have a new focus with underserved communities, and that's another way we try to kind of ask some of our bigger, more savvy partners to think about how to partner with some of those other communities that may not be as savvy. And so if there's any way that they can lend any of their expertise to others, watershed-based kind of planning and thinking about projects and how they connect to each other is always a great way to then think about how you build off of each other in a watershed. So anything you all can do there, I think, is a great way to stay coordinated and communicating.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Let me ask Kyle, who's been monitoring our chat, if there's any questions there for our panelists from the attendees of this afternoon's webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So we only have one question in the chat right now, but again, encouraging folks who would like to put some questions in the chat or Q&A, and we can tee them up for you. Right now, our question is for Shelley. So someone asked, for BLM, are proposed projects required to occur on BLM lands only? or to assist BLM meeting their priorities in the watershed where they have lands?
So that it depends on the notice funding opportunities. A lot of our opportunities are allowed to be adjacent to BLM land, but they do have to have a connection to the BLM land. They can be on private lands and state lands, and tribes can have neighboring lands that they can work with that are crossing over BLM, that kind of thing. It just depends on the specific specific announcement.
Great, thank you, Shelley.
All right, Kyle, does that exhaust our questions from the chat room?
That does, yep.
All right, well,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Mark.
very much. So at this point, what I'd like to do is kind of hand the ball off to Lisa for some closing comments, overviewing the panelists sessions, from this morning and this afternoon, prior to us moving into our chat rooms for the specific programs. Lisa.
Yeah, well, one, I'd like to thank everybody this afternoon for participating. Thank you to our federal partners who were able to show up. When we were planning this, we talked about, having some questions preordained, which we did use a little bit. But I said to Joanne, I said, oh my goodness, the questions are just going to be coming in tenfold. We'll never be able to keep up with all the questions. So my hope is that a lot of the reason why we didn't have a lot of questions was because you're just digesting what was heard, and that you intend on reaching out to the various partners that you heard today to get more information from them or to clarify how your projects fit in. And I hope it's not because we've confused you even more. The next part of this is to go into these breakout rooms where you can have a little bit of one-on-one, or at least less than 64-on-1, and meet with folks in maybe in a less intimidating place, ask some of the questions that you might be having, or they may be very specific to your projects, and then maybe that's why people are kind of holding them close to the vest. But one of the takeaways that I want you to walk out of here with is ask EPA, ask U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, ask BLM, ask USDA, ask all of our partners that have, ask NOAA, my main partner, ask NOAA, ask, do not hesitate to reach out to folks. Everyone here has emphasized that with exclamation points, and I'm going to do that one more time. Reach out to your regional folks. They are going to be your best advocates in the room. They're going to be the ones that know your projects and your area the best. And then finally, build up your partnership, develop a good collaborative so that you're hitting it on so many marks. You heard a lot of conversation this afternoon around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is an increasing priority at the federal level, and you're going to see that continue to rise in importance as these grant application cycles are moving forward, and envision that is just going to continue to be changing and upgrading. So be thinking about your regions and your areas and how you can make sure that you are not only addressing that environmental need, but also these win-wins that are looking at multiple benefits across the landscape for your communities that you're working in. So we're really happy that so many people joined us today. Don't hesitate to reach out to us at DLCD. You heard from Claire this morning, or myself. We're happy to talk to you further and help you move in the direction that you need to move in for your project developments. And this is just really great. We really appreciate Throwe and NIFWIF approaching us with this concept that has grown into what it was today. And working with them has been really great. And take Throwe up on their offer to help you work through your project development and when you're applying to NIFWIF. And although it's specific to NIFWIF, anything you're going to learn through that process is generally going to have a great application elsewhere. So everyone here today wants to help you. So take advantage of it. Use us and abuse us. That's what we're here for in terms of getting these monies on the ground and doing really good work in the state of Oregon. So I think we're going to be moving into our breakout rooms, and I'll pass it back to Joanne and Mark to help move us in that direction.
Thank you, Lisa. And I must say,